Hi, everyone. Daniela Multa, as Bill said, super excited to be with you. I love libraries, as I was sharing with Bill, and really value the importance of them in a community. So I'm so happy to kind of be part of this. So I'm excited to talk to you about media, and I do have some, or social media in particular, and I do have some slides to kind of help guide the conversation. But before that, I will just tell you a little bit about my background so you kind of know where I am coming from. So I am from Syracuse. I went to Le Moyne, and after I graduated, I immediately moved down to New York City. I worked in some advertising agencies. You can see the logos on the left, OMD, MEC. There are a lot of acronyms when it comes to advertising agencies. But really what my role there was is I would work with clients. So my clients were, for instance, Lowe's, Hershey's, Virgin Atlantic. And I would be making the decisions about where they should invest their money, their advertising dollars, to reach the people that they wanted to reach in order to fulfill the goals that they set out. So that could mean deciding to put a certain dollar investment on social media platforms versus, let's say, in podcasts versus on CNN.com and X other websites. So really deciding where to invest those dollars. And I spent about 6 years doing that in New York City. Had a lot of great experience, particularly doing digital media planning. And then I had the opportunity to move to San Francisco, first and foremost to work at Netflix. So Bill mentioned this, but I spent some time at Netflix, GoPro, and Facebook. And at all of these companies, I worked in their marketing departments. And I specifically worked on advertising. So rather than working at the agency, I had agencies that worked on my business at these companies. And through our relationship with these agencies, we decided how to bring our advertising efforts to life. So that was an amazing experience. And about a year ago, a little more than a year ago now, my husband and I decided to move back to Syracuse. And I decided to pivot in my career a little bit and to go into academia. So I joined Syracuse University in the fall. I'm a very new professor, very much still learning how to be a professor and how to teach. But the topic that I do teach is digital advertising, again, in the Newhouse School. You'll probably see this kind of come to light in the presentation, but my research interests really revolve around corporate responsibility at the intersection of ethics and digital media. So what that means is, as digital platforms and digital media continue to grow, there are a lot of ethical considerations for advertisers and corporations as they continue to invest in these spaces. And that's really what I look out to do some research on. And then I'll just mention, I also do a little bit of consulting here in Syracuse and nationwide through this consulting firm that I started last year called Cali York. As you can see, it kind of draws on California and New York and my experience in both of those places. But with that, that's enough about me. What I want to talk to you a little bit about today is social media. I'm going to start with just kind of recapping social media's impact on society at a very high level. We're not going to be able to spend that much time on it, though there is so much to dig into there. And then I want to talk a little bit about the business model of social media companies. And then we'll dig into what the advertising industry's ethical obligations are as it relates to the societal impact of social media. And then maybe we'll give you some tips and some insight into how, if you're interested, you can kind of gain some control and have a sense of control over what you do on social platforms if you have social media accounts and spend time there. So let's start with the impact on society. And where I guess I would like to start here, even before getting into this, is that social media has done so much good, and then it's done so much good for society, and that's where I will start, because I think we do have to give attention to that. But I think as of late, over the past, I don't know, 5+ years, we really started to see some of the harm that it has brought. And there's been a lot more attention on the harm. So I do want to make sure that I give a nod and acknowledge that there is good as well before we start to get into maybe some of the critiques of social media. So just starting with some of the good, I want to call out that, why a lot of these social media companies were initially founded, and what their mission and vision are to connect people, to bring people closer together. That is exactly what Facebook's mission is as a company. And they've done such a great job at that. So here's an example of my father. He's from Italy. He moved to New York State when he was about 16 years old. And he uses social media as a vehicle to stay connected with his family back in Italy, who did not move here to the United States. So this was on Christmas a few years ago. You can see his sister has commented down below on the photo. He was kind of cooking the 7 fishes on Christmas Eve, which is something that we do. And he, again, really uses this as a tool to stay connected with his friends and family back home. I mean, of course, he does that through sharing photos and commenting. He also uses Facebook Messenger as a tool to FaceTime or to video conference and video call his family and stay connected with them in that way. So, this is a close to home example of how social media has actually really allowed my family to stay closer despite being thousands of miles apart. So that's just one example of a good. Another good, we hear these stories all the time, and they're so awesome to see Facebook being used as a support vehicle, as a fundraising vehicle for people that are in need. So recently, GoFundMe had a campaign supporting a girl who is a senior in high school and was preparing for college. She had been working part-time, collecting savings in order to have a college fund, and her mom lost her job in COVID. They had bills to pay, so she turned over her college fund savings to her mom to help her pay those bills. And through social media and through a GoFundMe campaign, she was able to recoup those funds, and it's going to support her in going to college. So again, another really great example of how social is kind of bringing people together. And the last I'll mention, and again, there are so many, we just don't have time to go through all of the benefits, but social media is an amazing vehicle and tool for small businesses. First and foremost, it helps people discover businesses. So it's a discovery tool. I don't know about you all, but I find new businesses that I am interested in every time I'm on social media, whether that's from a friend that shared something about that business or even from an ad. So discovery is one really big benefit for small businesses. Then there's also the fact that it's a free tool for them to stay connected and to build a relationship with their customers, which again, didn't really exist before 2008. To have this deep of a connection with so many people in a digital environment. And then third, it is truly and can be a vehicle for sales. So for them to bring in revenue. So when it comes to small businesses, and certainly big businesses as well, but I tend to think through more of a community angle these days, social media has been a really great vehicle for them and a great tool for them. But with all these really great benefits, and with more of our attention on social media over the past few years, we've also seen that it can bring and has brought some harm. So again, I'm just going to go through a couple examples here to get us all on the same page. So the thing that's kind of most top of mind for everyone right now, I feel, is misinformation. And the fact that social media has allowed people to kind of live in filter bubbles, if you will, live in their own world of like-minded people that may be sharing information that may be true or may not be true. I think it's somewhat widely accepted at this point that misinformation that was spread on social media and organizing that happened on social media has a role in what happened at the Capitol in January. So that is one example of many in this space of politics where social media has not necessarily been a benefit to society. Another one that's very timely right now is free speech. So Mark Zuckerberg has been saying for a very long time that, he wants to see Facebook used as a vehicle for free speech, that he wants to see that come to light. And unfortunately, he's had to deal, him and his company and the executives at that company and on the board have really needed to consider where the line is with free speech. So you may have heard about the oversight board. It's supposed to be an independent board, the Supreme Court of Facebook, if you will, that is meant to kind of be this outside party that makes decisions on, is this okay? Is this content okay to live on Facebook? Is it really fulfilling our free speech rights? Or is it going against them in some way? So 2 weeks ago now, they had their biggest announcement, which was that they were going to uphold the Trump ban for now, while Facebook gets some more rules in place. And there are a lot of people that are really upset about that and that think that that is hindering his free speech. So free speech is another one where there's a lot of debate on that right now. And certainly a lot of people feel that social media is hindering free speech. Privacy, this is another really, really big topic. So the example I have here is Cambridge Analytica. And again, the focus on Facebook. And you'll see in this presentation, I do focus a lot on Facebook simply because when it comes to digital media and when it comes to social media, certainly they are the biggest player in that space. So on the privacy front, I'm sure everyone remembers in 2018, then when the news came out that 50 million Facebook users' accounts data was exploited in an illegal way in order to create these psychographic profiles that politicians were then using to try to reach people on Facebook and to target them with messaging that you could say might be considered unethical, because they really were trying to hone in on people that are more anxious with like really anxious messaging about where the country was going. So this is another example where there are some privacy concerns that are definitely to be had within the social space. And then another topic that has been coming up quite a bit is kind of the harm that social brings to our mental state. Particularly, the example I'm going to show you here is among young girls who, are on social media frequently. They're kind of doing a lot of comparing, how they look versus how people look, or comparing their lives to people's lives that they see on social media. And there is some negative impact that is happening there. So I'm actually going to play a little video because this is relatively new, but Dove, this is a Dove commercial. If you've kind of followed Dove's advertising, they tend to really hone in on cause-driven messages for women in particular. So let me just play this and I'll let it kind of speak for itself. So again, mental health, self-esteem is one thing that social media is having probably a very unexpected, for the people at Facebook that created Facebook, an unexpected impact on society. And then the last thing I'll call out is this idea of, and you may have heard this term, a digital detox or a social media detox. So I know in a lot of conversations I have, people are just feeling overwhelmed with social media that, they go on there mindlessly, they spend hours and don't even realize sometimes that they're doing that. And then they don't really feel good about that time that they invested. So there really is a renewed focus now happening in terms of how to have a better relationship with social media and how to have a healthy balance. So this example here is comes from a yoga studio actually out of Manlius. It's Mindful Yoga, and Heather, the owner, has created this program. It's kind of like a class that you can take that helps people navigate social media and helps them to find how to have a better balance on that platform. So this idea to me that people are having to detox from social media is immediately tells me that there's negative connotation there, right? Because if you're detoxing something, that means something is toxic in your life. So again, just another example of how it can be having some negative impacts on society. So all of that, again, those are just a few examples to set the groundwork, but all of that constantly has me thinking about a couple of things. One is, at the end of the day, I would love if I could answer, is Facebook in particular and social media more broadly, are they a net good on society or not? That's some research I would love to do and try to answer, but it's such a big, meaty topic that I don't even know how I would address it. But if you all have some ideas, I would love to discuss that. But in more practical terms, what I'm constantly asking myself is, what can I do as a consumer to have, again, a better relationship with social media? So that's one thing we'll talk about in a moment. And also, what can I do as an advertiser and now as an educator to just bring light to some of these issues? And as an advertiser, what can I do with my dollars that I'm giving to Facebook? I'm essentially funding Facebook at the end of the day, because that's where their dollars are going, to help make positive change. So that is what we will kind of hop into. So I do feel like it's important just to kind of break down the business model of social media, which is an advertising model. So, but first, before kind of even hopping into that, I went and I looked at Facebook's Q1 2021, so last quarter's revenue through their financial results. And what I saw is that a couple of things. First of all, they brought in $25 billion with a B in Q1. That is a incredible amount of money. That is worldwide, but that's, I don't know, that's quite a lot. And it's almost 50% higher than where we were last year. Now we're going to talk about this in a moment, but digital media companies of all shapes and sizes, those that have an advertising business model and those that do not, have really done well in the pandemic, because of course we as consumers have been more and more reliant on digital media than ever before. And we now have new behaviors that we did not have before. But when you break down that $25 billion that they brought in Q1, 97% of that is from advertising. So only 3% is from other revenue sources. So at the end of the day, when I think about, how to potentially create some change at social media companies and in my own life, I tend to go to, okay, how is that company making money? So if we think about a Facebook, for instance, which again, they own many different companies, but another big social media company is Instagram. So when I think about Facebook and Instagram, they kind of serve these two audiences. One is their advertisers. So the advertisers are how they make money. We just saw 97% of their revenue comes from advertisers. So they, of course, are going to cater to those advertisers. They are going to want to offer them the most effective and efficient advertising solutions that they can in order to keep their business model in good health. And then on the flip side of that is their users. So everyone that has an account, like myself and probably many of you as well. And this is the other audience that they, have to cater to, and another audience that they hope will continue to grow in volume and will continue to grow in terms of the amount of time that they spend on that platform. And of course, these two things go hand in hand. Right? Because the more users they have and the more time that they spend, the more advertisers are going to be interested in reaching them in that environment. But the real reason that Facebook in particular has been so successful outside of all of those things I mentioned so far is the data that they have access to and that they can build profiles off of in order to offer targeting to the advertisers. So when you think about their data that they have access to, you should just kind of assume at this point that anything that you as a user do on any social media platform, that they are capturing that data and they are using it to inform their targeting and their advertising solutions for advertisers. So for instance, when you're on Facebook, any pages that you follow, that's going to be a clue to Facebook as to what your interests are. Any sort of interactions, meaning if you like or comment or share something, they're going to look at what is that content that you're sharing, and that's going to infer something about you as a user. They look at things like how long does your mouse hover over a post? And what does that tell you about how much time you spent hovering over that single post versus other posts that you may see in your feed? So all the activity that we have as users on these platforms, that is certainly informing their models. And now that they have 2 billion plus people on these platforms, they have a lot of data to build these models off of, which is really great for them as a business. But then there's this other area that I'm not sure, and I would love to know after when we open it up for conversation, if this is something you're familiar with, but there is this type of data that's called off Facebook data. And we're going to walk through a couple examples of it right here, but just to kind of define off Facebook activity or data for you. This is activity that businesses or organizations share with Facebook about what their users are doing off of Facebook. So let me walk you through 2 examples. So one of these solutions is Facebook Connect. You can see it here on the left-hand side. If you've ever went to sign into an account somewhere outside of Facebook and you see these options, continue with Facebook, continue with Google, what those do outside of making it a little bit easier for you to sign in because your Facebook information is, saved on your computer is it basically allows, in this example, Grubhub, who's a food delivery service, they offer this Facebook Connect. So if I were to sign in with Facebook, what it's doing is it's passing information back to Facebook, because now Facebook can link my account with that Grubhub account. And it's passing back information such as now Facebook knows that I am a person who tends to like to use these online food services. It can also pass back, let's see, in this example, they may be passing back where I'm ordering this food in. So in Syracuse, New York. So it's giving a clue as to where I live. Or maybe if I was traveling, it would then know that I'm in a different city. So the company, in this case Grubhub, decides what information to pass back to Facebook, but any of that information that they decide to pass back, Facebook is then using again to inform that targeting that they offer to advertisers. And you may wonder, like, why would Grubhub even want to offer this? Why would they want to use Facebook Connect? And there's kind of two reasons. One is Grubhub gets a lot more information about their users by connecting through a Facebook, so they can see more detailed information about people when they sign in. They also, in offering this, kind of give people an easier sign-in process, which gets people to sign in quicker, which helps them to retain people on their platform. So there's a couple benefits as to why some companies decide to use this Facebook Connect, but we should all be aware that Facebook also benefits from it as well. And then another example, and I promise these will be the most like techie slides in here, but I do think they're kind of interesting, is a Facebook pixel, which is a piece of code that a lot of websites put on their website in order to do a number of things. But let me explain this here first. So in Chrome, anyone can download what's called the Facebook Pixel Helper. So it's an extension that goes on your browser, and you, when you're visiting any website, you can click open that extension and you can see if there is a Facebook pixel on that page. So the example I have here is I was on American Airlines. I looked for a flight from Syracuse to San Francisco departing on June 1st. And with this Facebook Pixel Helper, I can see that this is all of the information that they are sending to Facebook. So first things first, they're saying, what is this person's origin airport? Syracuse, the destination airport, San Francisco. It's also has in here the dates that I would be departing and returning. So a couple of things I want to mention about this. One is that even though I'm saying I myself, they don't know that it's Daniela Molta. It's all anonymized with a number. So that is important for you to know in case if this does heavily concern you. And the other things I want to mention are, again, why American Airlines would decide to pass this information to Facebook. Well, one reason is, let's say I did not go ahead and purchase this flight, but American Airlines wants me to purchase this flight, right? They want to secure that sale. The next time I'm on Facebook, if I'm using this same computer that I searched for this flight from, what they can do is decide to serve me an ad. And in that ad, they could get really specific and say, hey, we're having a promotion on flights from Syracuse to San Francisco in the month of June. So they can make it really relevant to what I'm interested in potentially buying a flight for, which again can help them to kind of solidify that sale. So that's one reason why they would implement a pixel like this. And again, the benefit to Facebook is that they now have a ton of information in terms of me, a user on their platform. So they know that I like to travel. They know that I'm interested in American Airlines as an airline. They know that I want to go to California and that I'm actively in the market right now for travel. So you can imagine if you're an Airbnb or some other travel company, you would want to be able to tap into those pieces of information in order to run your advertising campaign. So this is all really to say that, you know, Facebook serves both advertisers and users. And the reason that they've been so successful is because of all of this data that they capture, not just on their own platform, but off of their platform as well. So now I just kind of want to transition a little bit into that question that I posed earlier, which is, what is the advertising industry's ethical obligations as it relates to the societal impact on of social media? So as a former advertiser, because again, I used to work at Netflix and GoPro, and I actually worked at a division of Facebook at one point as well. I constantly am asking myself, like, what is the advertiser's role in all of this? Because again, they are the ones that are at the end of the day kind of funding these social media companies by giving them their advertising dollars. So here's a pretty telling chart that I just want to walk you through, which is this. What this is these are all the years down here, so 2015 to 2020, and then the bars in total show how much advertising spend is happening in the United States. So in 2020, advertisers in the United States spent a little over $225 billion on advertising in the United States specifically. And what we see here is that over half of that investment is happening with just 3 partners: Amazon, Facebook, and Google. So in the advertising industry, we often talk about the duopoly. So taking Amazon out of it for a moment, because you can see they are a quickly growing company when it relates to advertising, but not quite as big as Facebook and Google. So we always talk about the duopoly, which is this idea that when you decide as an advertiser to spend money in digital media, that your investment is more likely than not going to be heavily invested in Facebook and in Google, because they have a bit of a duopoly on the market. Now with Amazon, we can call it a triopoly. But what's really kind of surprising about these numbers here is, historically, we would talk about how Facebook and Google made up over half of the digital media spend, meaning the advertising that happens on digital platforms specifically. So not your television, not your newspaper, not your radio. But as of last year, when COVID hit, we are now seeing that these 3 companies are making up more than half of the advertising spend across all the different media, whether it's traditional media or digital media. So that's quite a big shift and a kind of a pretty big milestone, if you will, for the advertising industry. So when I think about, if as an advertiser, how to impact change in this space, I think that an advertiser has a huge responsibility to think about where their dollars are going and start to think of those dollars as basically supporting these companies and the decisions that they make in their business practices. So what I talk to students about, and what I'm starting to have more and more conversations with actual marketers and advertisers about, is the advertiser's ethical obligations. And I have 3 kind of things here that I want to mention that, again, I'm hoping to kind of get students to start thinking about, since they are the advertisers of tomorrow. So one is this idea of having a data ethics agenda. What I mean by that is, over the past 10 to 15 years, I have to say, in the advertising industry and digital in particular, advertisers, and me included, I worked in this industry for quite a long time. We were trying to capture as much data as we could to kind of have the most effective and efficient plan in order to try to show people the most personalized ads that we could, again, in hopes that that would translate into some sort of performance, whatever that performance is that we were looking for. And I think back at it, and the analogy I use is that we were kind of operating with our eyes wide shut. So we were capturing as much data as we possibly could, and then kind of trying to figure out after the fact what to do with that data. And with this data ethics agenda, and what some businesses are starting to shift their mindset to, is this idea of, it's not what data can I collect, but why should I collect that data? That's essentially the question that we as advertisers need to start asking ourselves is, why do I need this data? What is the purpose of this data? Does this fit into my ethical agenda that I set up, or does this kind of cross some barrier that does not require me to collect this data? That's one part of the data ethics agenda that I am really pushing for. Another part of data ethics is just, if you recall, I mentioned that there are these marketing departments at big companies. They work with advertising agencies. Those advertising agencies, they're really the ones that kind of make the nitty-gritty decisions on what partners to work with and which targeting to employ, meaning making the decisions on, should I be reaching travel enthusiasts or online shopping enthusiasts? Those are two examples of targeting. And what I think is that the people that hold the purse strings, if you will, that would be the ultimate advertiser who's spending their money, they need to have a lot more visibility into the targeting that their agencies are employing on their behalf, rather than just relying on the agency to do the right thing. So these are some of the examples of what I mean by advertisers need to have a data ethics agenda. The second category I have here is the idea of using investment for advocacy. So again, if we as advertisers can start to think of our advertising dollars as basically the lifeblood of what's keeping the lights on at Facebook and keeping them in business, then we really should start thinking about our advertising dollars as an opportunity to affect the change that we want to see in the world. So for example, there was one example of this over the summer, last summer, where this organization, Stop Hate for Profit, kind of created a campaign, and a lot of attention was put on this, that they wanted to see Facebook in particular have stronger standards against hate language and speech on their platforms. They felt that Facebook was just letting anything come and go, and they were not kind of putting their foot down and kicking people off the platform when they were talking in hateful ways. And their assumption is that Facebook is unwilling to do that because they don't want to hinder the profit that's coming in. And if they kick people off their platform, then there's less people that are engaging, which again kind of goes into that formula that I mentioned earlier of the users are almost like the product that allows them to sell ads. So this organization did quite a good job in getting the attention of hundreds of really large advertisers who decided to stop their advertising campaigns on Facebook and Instagram. Sometimes it was just one of those platforms. It depended on the advertiser for 1 month to kind of make it clear to Facebook that they were unhappy with their practices. Now, to be honest, most of the advertisers went off for a month and then came back, or they just held their investment on Facebook and they let it run on Instagram. And at the end of the day, if we look back at that quarter where the investment stopped for a lot of advertisers for a month, Facebook still ended up bringing in more revenue than they did the prior year, same quarter. So I think it was a good effort, but it maybe did not stick, or it wasn't in effect for that long because it was just for 1 month. We also had COVID happening, and a lot of businesses were kind of reallocating their investments to social media and to digital platforms, which I'm sure was part of why they didn't really see any impact to their revenue at the end of the day. But this idea of using investment for advocacy is something I'm very interested in. And then the last thing that I talk to students and advertisers about is that they just, we're going to have to be a little more willing to sacrifice performance, meaning, every business, they want to see the numbers go up and to the right. They want to see positive growth always. You want to do better, better, better in terms of your sales or your revenue. But I think as advertisers, we really need to be willing to take a step back and realize that we can't always expect things to go up and to the right. And we may need to sacrifice performance to make some of these hard decisions, such as potentially not investing on Facebook for a period of time until they start to make some of the changes that these companies want to see. So that's a little bit about the advertisers' ethical obligations. The last thing I just want to leave you with before we talk is kind of how consumers could potentially gain some sense of control on these platforms. I know in a lot of the circles and people I talk to, they feel like they have no control. They feel like Facebook's kind of going to do what they're going to do, and there's nothing I can do about that. Or Facebook's going to track me across all these different apps, and whether I'm on Facebook or off of Facebook, and what can I do about that? So there's a couple things I do want to walk you through. One thing you may have heard about, it's certainly gotten a lot of attention as of late, is Apple's recent operating system update. So I think it was last week or the week prior, they launched a new operating system. So if you have an Apple product, at some point you're going to update your operating system. And one part of that update is going to be this app transparency queue that you're going to get. It's a screen like this, and it's going to ask you, do you want this app to be able to track you? So again, once you update your operating system, it will take some time for all the apps to comply with Apple's new guidance. But what each and every app has to do before you enter that app is ask you, are you okay if we continue to track you? And you're going to say, no, I do not want them to track, or yes, I'll allow tracking. So I'm going to show you one more video just to really help explain this. This is a video from Apple that they released when the operating system came out, and it's really meant to educate consumers on why have they decided to make this decision, and what is the consumer at the end of the day making a decision about. So basically to give all of us some more context on this screen that we're going to start getting, and make sure that people understand what they're making a decision about. So you can see that Apple is taking a privacy standpoint there, that you should have the option to your privacy. It shouldn't be something that you have to opt out for. You should actually have to opt in. So if you're curious about this, I'm not going to play this or anything, but there was a really good podcast from The Daily. It's a New York Times podcast last week on May 11th called Apple versus Facebook. And it kind of gives some good context as to the debate that's really happening between these two companies right now, because a lot of people, particularly Facebook, feel that Apple made this decision to kind of hurt their business model. Because if you think about it now, rather than the tracking just happening behind the scenes, people are going to have to opt in for it. And the expectation is a lot of people are going to say, no, I'd rather that this app does not track me. And that's really going to hurt Facebook's business model. So I'll just say that this is a great podcast if you want to learn a little bit more. So the last slide I have here for you is just that a couple other tips if you're kind of interested in feeling like you want to have a bit more balance or control when it comes to social media. So I wrote an opinion piece after the riots at the Capitol, because I felt really compelled to do so when I was understanding social media's role in those. And a couple of things that I wrote in that piece are, one, the more that we as users of these platforms talk about these concerns, whether it be in an environment like this or with our friends and family, or even as you are on the platforms, the more attention that these topics will get, and the higher likelihood that these companies will realize that that part of the people they serve, who are their users, are upset with the practices that they have in place. So the more that we can talk about it, the more awareness is built. The second thing I would say is, if you're really concerned about it, you could limit your time on the platform. So every user that these companies lose is money that they are losing that they could sell to advertisers, right? So I know I personally, I don't really use Facebook as an app anymore, except for business purposes. Like I have to do a lot of reporting and whatnot in there. I still am on Instagram quite a bit. But I do try to be mindful about the time that I have, and try to use it wisely, which kind of leads to this third bucket I have here, which is finding the right balance. So just knowing that a lot of people feel that they are just mindlessly on these platforms, and knowing that you have a choice in going on these platforms, and you can make some decisions to, again, limit your time or try to find whatever that right balance is for you. And then, of course, you can make decisions like we saw on the previous slide, where you actually restrict the tracking. And there's lots of options like that above and beyond what Apple is doing. It just kind of requires you to know where to look for these options and these selections within your settings, which is kind of why Apple is bringing it straightforward, right right front and center.